your name, where you served and for how long, and how you came to serve.
Oh, well, you better prompt me along the way.
I will.
But my name is Roger Irving Polhemus. And what's the next thing?
Where did you serve and for how long? And in
Oh,
what capacity?
okay. I started out in the Army Specialized Training Program, which was you went to a college and they tried to teach you to be something you could never be. They wanted to make me an engineer in 4 months. You know, anybody can be an engineer in 4 months. I did pretty good the first semester, but the second semester I went downhill. I had a couple of C's and D's, and I went to my fellow that was in charge of my section, and I says, I'd like to get on active duty. Oh, you don't want to get on active duty? All sorts of hell is breaking out in Europe. You know, you don't want to do that. I says, yes, I want to do that. And so I went on active duty at, I think I went in at Fort McPherson, Georgia. And they sent me to a beauty place in Georgia to take my basic training. And that was Macon, and the name of the camp was Camp Wheeler. Beautiful place, just beautiful. And I stayed there for, 17 weeks, something like that. And then I took a 2-week vacation, we called it leave. Then I went to Fort Meade, Maryland, in preparation of going to Europe. And while I was there, I was learning how to disarm personal mines. And as the instructor was talking to us, the first thing he said was, we only make one mistake. Because if you make a mistake, you blow yourself up, you know. It's so, anyway, I was sitting in class one day, and this second lieutenant came in, broke into the class. He says, is there anybody here that hasn't reached their 19th birthday? I raised my hand, and there was about 6 of us that raised our hands. We went to Texas for future training. All the rest of the guys went to Europe, and that was just about the time of the Battle of the Bulge. So my age kept me out of harm's way that way.
Did you end up in Europe?
No. I was fortunate enough to go to the South Pacific.
Tell us where.
After I trained in Texas, the weather was so fine, golly. I wish I could go back to those days, because the only place that you could walk in dust and be raining, you know, you'd after a while you'd walk through mud and things like that. You couldn't keep that damn sand out of your barracks. The sand would go right through the screens. You'd sweep it out in the morning, you come back in the afternoon, and it'd be little piles of dirt all over the floor, and you had to do it all over again. It was such a treat. Anyway, from Texas, I went to Fort Ord, California. And right outside of Fort Ord was a little town called Richmond, I believe. And that's where we got on the boats to go to the Pacific.
Where did you go?
Where?
Where did you end up?
I ended up in the Philippines. We were supposed to go to, and this was about the time of the atomic bomb. We didn't know anything about the atomic bomb, you know. And we went to the Marshalls to get new orders. And they said, well, we can't give you the orders here, you'll have to go to Hawaii. So we went to Hawaii. It didn't land or anything. The only thing I remember about Hawaii was one palm tree that was almost standing up. The rest of it was just nothing. And so we finally ended up in the Philippines, and we were supposed to land in Manila. Well, the Manila Bay was loaded with ships that had been sunk in the masts, and the ship could not get into the harbor, so it went to a jetty, you know, and they offload us there, and we got on these little boats, and the boats took us into a place that was like an island, but covered. What do they call those things that are jutted out? And well, anyway, we were offloaded there, and they said the train will be within 3 days to pick you up. Well, those people that were in that part of the service didn't realize that the Japanese were blowing up railroad tracks. And the railroad train did not come for several days. And we had enough food rations for about 3 days. And then after that, we had to barter the natives for fruit, papayas, and mangoes, and things like that. Well, if you've never eaten a papaya, it tastes horrible. And they call them alligator pears, or what they call them. These guys would bite into that alligator pear, and they hated it. Well, I had lived in Miami before I came into the service, and I was used to alligator pear. So what I did, I had 3 cigarettes, and I'd get 2 lemons for 3 cigarettes, and I'd just put a little lemon juice on that alligator pear, and man, I was in hog heaven. But
could you tell us about the object you brought in?
The what?
Could you tell us about what you brought in?
Oh yes, this is my life history plus my family goes back to 1077, something like that, and it was prepared by an aunt of mine. But this is my family tree. You know, it has branches. And the guy that brought our name to America, his name was Van Polhemus. Well, he was a Dutch Reformed minister. And there was people who wanted to be, have that Van. It's a sign of wealth or something like that. They wanted to be wealthy. So they bought his Van, and it was enough money to get him from Holland to Brazil, because he was going to set up a Dutch Reformed ministry in Brazil. Well, he got down to Brazil, and he did a lot of work, got a congregation, and he says, well, I'm going to go back to Holland, get my family, and bring them down here. Well, the God works in strange ways, because on the way back, the ship either lost the rudder or a mast was broken, and they had to limp into New Amsterdam, which is New York. And as soon as he got to the harbor master, he says, when is the next ship going back to Europe? And the harbor master says, man, you are lucky. There'll be one here in 1.5 years. Well, those were the days, those were the 1600s. Those were the days when they didn't have transportation like they got it now. It was all sail. There was no motor at all. So he says, well, what am I going to do for 1.5 years? Well, the guy says, find a job. So he created a Dutch Reformed church in New York. And he named the community that he was living in after the community who he was from in Holland. And the community was H-A-A with umlauts over the second A, R-L-E-M, Harlem. So my relatives started Harlem and got this Dutch Reformed ministry going, and he's doing great guns. He went back to Holland, picked up his family, and brought them to New Amsterdam. Brazil was forgotten about. So that's how my name got. If it had gone otherwise, I might be speaking Portuguese. But anyways, Johannes, and out of him there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 children. And we came from, the family tree starts with Daniel, and Daniel had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 children. And we came, the family tree came from Johannes, and then Johannes had 6 children, and our family tree came from a guy by the name of Tobias, and he had, oh God, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 children. Of course, they all didn't live, but that was how the family tree was.
So
And
the book is all about your family had a history from
well,
the 17th century to the present.
yeah, down here at the bottom is my father's name was Lester, and he had 1, 2, 3, 4 boys, and I was one of them. And then Uncle Clinton was my father's brother, and he had several children. And it tells about the history in Europe, and let's see how far it goes back. 1598 is when von Polheim was born. And it tells all about what children he had, and when it gets up in here. And I had some of these pictures, some of these pages. Like this is my grandfather. He was in the Civil War, and this is my, oh, you want to take a picture of it, huh?
Just want to show it to the camera.
Yeah, okay. And this is my grandfather, and this is Tabor Chadwick came out of Samuel Haven's Polhemus, and then my great-grandfather's name was Levi Woolley Polhemus. And I was kidding with the young gentleman that took, put this digitization, and I said, Levi, that's where the blue jeans got their name was from this Levi. And this little boy said, really? I said, no. Anyway, it goes through here, and I had him take pictures of, or digitize several pages. I think 1, 2, and then we skip over to my part of it. See, these are all the different boys and their wives, and I'm toward the, oh, no, not yet. Well,
do you have some pictures of your time in the South Pacific, or?
No, we didn't have cameras in those days.
Didn't have any?
I was an infantryman, and every place I went, I carried everything that I had. And we did not have those niceties, I'm sorry. Oh, come on, Roger. You're in here someplace. Oops, here we go. Yeah, this picture was digitized. It showed some of the people. This is people that I knew in Korea. This man here, his name is Mr. Ha, and he wanted to become a doctor. Well, there wasn't too many medical books that were printed in Korean, so and he could speak German. So all the books that he had were German books. He would translate that into Korean, and it's kind of a long process. And so I got a hold of my aunt, the lady that did this, and told her, I says, can you get a hold of any medical books that might be printed in Korean? And if you can, why, send them over. If not, we've got to work a different route. Well, she got together, she was a member of a Methodist church in Washington, D.C., and they had these little things where women would get together and talk about the Bible and different stuff like that. And she got them to find some of their friends that had medical dictionary, medical paraphernalia, and they sent boxes that were huge boxes to this Mr. Howe to help him in his medical work.
Did you serve in Korea as well?
What?
Did you serve in Korea as well?
Oh yes, oh yes. Beautiful place, just beautiful. But I was lucky because they found out in the Second World War that I was a lover and not a fighter. And so they would always put me in higher headquarters. And when I was in Korea, I started out in Busan. And then by train, we went up to, oh gosh, what was the name of the town? I've forgotten. But anyway, we went someplace else. And then we came back to Busan and finished out my service. And I learned through the grapevine that there was a special program out that if you served 10 months in Korea, you could get a transfer to Japan. And that way I could bring my wife over. See, I couldn't bring her over while I was in Korea. And so that's what I did. And I got my wife over there. And we lived in Japan for a while.
Thank you so much for your memories.
Oh, well now, what I've got to tell you is not anything here. It's something that actually happened to me while I was doing work. We went from the Philippines up to Japan. I got in the war just about the time it was over. And thank God for President Truman, because he pushed the button and dropped the bomb. Because we were scheduled to invade Japan, which would have been a big mistake. Because they said if American soldiers did invade, all of the people that they had in stockades, prisoner of war camps would be beheaded. No questions, you know, that was it. So thank God for President Truman. Now this is a story that I'd like to tell if I got enough time.
Please.
Yeah. Okay. Occupation duty. We went from the Philippines to Japan on occupation duty. Well, evidently the Japanese government put out, you know, this was after they surrendered and all that stuff, and put out the word that send all of the young women and middle-aged people up into the mountains, because it was known that the American soldier would rape all the women and then kill them. It was wonderful PR. I mean, you know, you couldn't get that. You couldn't buy that. You know, it was free rides. Anyway, we landed in Sasebo, I think was the name of it. And from there we went up to Fukuoka. Well, on the train trip up, there was little kids along the railroad tracks, and they were hollering, "Ohio, Ohio!" And we figured there was a train ahead of us. People were from Ohio, but that's not the truth. Ohio is a greeting, right? Good morning.
Ohio de gozaimasu.
I'm sorry?
Ohio de gozaimasu.
Yeah. Oh, you speak very good. Ichi, san, shi, go, roku, hichi, hachi, kuju. That's a whole paragraph. Of course, it's just counting from 1 to 10. Anyway, we got on occupation. We were up there. Got to Fukuoka, which is, I guess it was the second or third largest city on Kyushu. And when we got into the town, I was in an combat engineer battalion. And our job was to help the Navy to get rid of mines that were blocking the harbor. And when I wasn't doing anything along that line, why, I'd walk the streets, and these little kids would come up to you and say, "Presento, presento." And about the only present that I had were these little chocolate bars that were made by Nestle and Hershey, hard as a rock, because they wouldn't melt in the southern climate. So we always carried those in our pockets, eat them like a popsicle, suck on them. So I gave him 2 or 3 of those, and he had a big smile on his face, and then all of a sudden he dropped his face and he says, "Presento 9," which meant, "I don't have a present for you." So I told him, "Ship by night," which means, "Don't worry." And I started walking away, and he grabbed my hand and led me down the street for about a block and a half. And then we started going down steps. We'd go down a flight of steps, make a turn, go down another flight. We went down 3 flights of stairs. When we got to the bottom, there was this great big room, and the only thing, they had doors on one end, and this little boy went over and opened up the doors. And I took one look in there, and I says, I call upon the Lord, JC, I says, to myself, I says, I don't think we know anything about these. It was a 2-man submarine depot where they'd come in and get more ammunition and fix their submarines and so forth. And of course, I was only a corporal at the time, and I felt, well, I better check with my captain, because he probably knows about it. I wasn't privy to that information. And I dashed upstairs, got a trolley car, went back to my base, went into the captain's office, and I says, "I've seen something that I don't know whether you have seen it or not, or even know about it." And he says, "Get the hell out of here, Polhemus. You're nothing but trouble." I said, "You can have my stripes right now, but you've got to see what I've seen down in Fukuoka." And I says, "We can jump on the trolley car and go on down." "Trolley, hell," he says, "use my Jeep." So we jumped in the Jeep, and I told him how to get there. The little boy was still there, waiting. He knew. He knew. And so he took the captain's hand, and the captain says, "Where are we going?" I says, "You're going to paradise and heaven, buddy." So he went down the steps, and I says, "Captain, I want you to open those big doors." And he did. He said the same thing I did, JC. And he says, I don't know anything about these submarines. And so he says, "I've got to get in touch with the Navy." Well, those were the days before cell phones, or walkie-talkies for that matter. And so we dashed back upstairs, went back to the company. He called the Navy, and the Navy says, "You must be kidding." He says, "No, I'll meet you at such and such a place in Fukuoka, and I'll show you." So the Navy didn't know anything about it. And the captain came over to me and patted me on the back, and he said, "Good job, Roger." Well, they didn't. First names were never said. It was Corporal. "Thanks a lot, Corporal Polhemus. You did a fine job." Of course, he got credit for finding those submarines. Captains always do that. But that's the story that I wanted to tell you. It's a true story, and first person. And there's a place now in Japan that it's a place where they teach their officers, Navy officers, and at their headquarters on the front lawn are 2 two-man submarines. And I don't know whether they're the ones that I found or not, but it was quite an experience.
Thank you so much.
That's it? No more questions?
I wish we had more time.